Well, good evening. And I'm learning more how to spell it and say it and all that good stuff, the more trips that I make over here. And I'm still trying to figure out when you turn left out of here and you leave, you go up to the main drag here, you can't turn left. At least when nobody's looking. Yeah, exactly. I mean, yeah. It's not a ticketable offense if you don't get caught, right? Buddy of mine, is there a camera? Oh, thanks for that warning. I haven't done it, but I've thought about it. A buddy of mine is in the Gulf, or was in the Gulf of Mexico. He's down on the Florida coast, and him and his wife, they sent me a picture of fishing out on the ocean yesterday, the Gulf of Mexico. And he said they were catching a bunch of angelfish. Actually, she was catching a bunch of angelfish. He had caught one, and he said, we're not keeping any of them because they're not in season. You can't keep them. I said, but only if you get caught, right? So how's everybody been since we were last here last month? Was it last month? No, it was this month. Yeah, it was first week of this month. So, what's that?
We haven't got caught yet.
You haven't got caught yet. That's good. That's good. Anybody with any comments or questions from our previous lessons that you had? How many of you remember what we talked about last week? Our last class. I'll say that probably 10 times tonight, so bear with me. Who remembers what we talked about 3 weeks ago? Right? Yeah, a lot of water under the bridge, right? What did we talk about? What's that? I gave you homework too, so that's my next slide. So I'm glad you remembered that piece. I hope you remembered to do the homework, all right? That's fine, that's fine. As long as you did it, right? You went to class, you did the homework, it's not a problem. Last time we talked about saving, right? Saving for an emergency fund and saving for those other things that we need to be saving for. Would you agree with me that Christmas is not an emergency? But it is something that we should be saving for. In fact, if my calendar's right, today's the 27th, we are less than 6 months away from Christmas. Friday would have been 6 months from Christmas. Hopefully everybody's on target to be able to save for their Christmas money or not participate, whichever one you know. You're gonna go out and you're gonna put on a credit card like most of America to do that, all right? Well, hopefully you won't do that. Other things that you might be saving for, besides that emergency fund, remember what's the amount that we want to start with our emergency fund? $1,000, okay? But what other things could we and should we be saving for? I mean, we all know that it's not the end of the world if we don't save for Christmas, right? If we don't buy a Christmas gift, everything's going to be all right. The world's going to continue on. But some other things that maybe we'll have need of, what are some of those other things that maybe we should be saving for? A car. What do you mean by a car?
Like if something happens to the car.
Car repair. Absolutely right. Average car repair is about $400 for each repair. Some more, some less. Yeah, depending on the situation, but average, according to cars.com, about 400. Actually, it's like 398, I think, is their official number. But you've got those. But also with cars, what about saving to buy your next car? Paying cash for it. I've had some young people in my office, and I said, you know that you can save up cash and take that wad of cash or a check from your bank and go buy a car. You don't have to finance it. And I've had them look at me and say, really? I'm like, you're joking me, right? No, I thought you had to finance it. I thought you had to go to the dealer and be able to get this and do that. Yeah, well, most people are like that. Any comments about saving? What else could we be saving for? A house, absolutely. House repairs, a house purchase, any number of things. Something that you want not necessarily to repair, but something you like to do to the house. What else? Baby, there you go, absolutely. Vacations, excellent one. And then when you go on vacation, remember we did that budget 2 lessons ago? And we had those things in cash. Your vacation money needs to be in cash, and guess what? You don't have to speed to beat the Visa bill back home. Yeah, you got to take care of. Most people, when they go on vacation with cash, bring money back, which is a huge blessing. The elephant in the room. Anybody know what that means? And I'm not talking about me. Credit cards, debt, absolutely. It's our subject tonight, debt. I'm not going to ask you to show of hands, but obviously all of us probably in one way or another have been affected by debt. I think I shared with you one of the last times I was here about the Statler brothers. Did I ever mention the Statler brothers to you? And my love for the Statler brothers. I love those guys. I grew up listening to the Statler brothers and their music, but not only their music, but who they were, how they conducted themselves, the gentlemen they are. They're Christian men as well. And I've got to know a couple of them by some of the stuff that they do. But one of the books that I got, that I've received recently, is what they call the Statler Brothers Anthology. Don Reed, the lead singer, had sit down and he took meticulous notes when they were doing this stuff. But he wrote notes, and he wrote a book recently of every album and every song that they did. It's kind of amazing to go back and you look at this and you listen to all this stuff, and he hits on it. It's about 400 or 500 pages long in this thing. But I was reading it this afternoon before I left the house to come over here, trying to avoid taking a nap because the TV went out, the internet went out at my house, and I stream everything, so it was kind of like twiddling our thumbs. We're moving. All the TVs that had antenna are in the storage, and so we've got one TV, it's streaming. So we were just trying to figure out something that you do back in the old days because the internet's not working, right? Here's a song that they had on one of their albums, one of their later albums, just before they retired. And I don't even remember the name of the song, I don't do it, but here's one of the verses. Sometimes, whoop, and that changed on me. Sometimes I think my honey thinks money grows on trees. She blows through our bank account like a whirlwind goes through leaves. When there's nothing left but branches and the green's all gone, oh Lord, that's when she pulls that plastic out and says, put it on the card. Anybody ever been there and done that? No? Yeah, we all have. And I say all, collectively, we all. Statistically, most people have. I'm going to share some numbers with you tonight that'll be frightening to you as well if you think about it. But how many of you did your homework? Now, what I'd like for you to do when class is over is to give me your homework, all right? I don't want your name on it, so if you got your name, scratch it out, okay? I'm just looking at numbers. I'm going to add it up. I'll share it with you in 2 weeks of what collectively, what our numbers are. Looking for these numbers here. If you haven't done it, to the best of your ability, write that down. If you don't have it with you and you want to do it at home, and you want to shoot me an email, that's fine, but I'm going to scratch your name out when you do it. I'm not going to share any names. This is not public information. It's just numbers to look at this, for you to see a picture of what's going on. But how much do you have in total unsecured debt? Now, when I say unsecured debt, that could be car loans, credit cards, and so forth. Even though a car loan is not necessarily an unsecured debt, it is a debt that you're paying. But an unsecured debt, the total number of credit cards that you have, and the remaining amount on your mortgage balance. If you can put those numbers down and either give those to me at the end of class, and again, if you need to send it to me in email, let me know. I've got some cards. I can give you my email address as well. Okay? Anybody with any questions on that? Okay, good. Debt. How many of you like debt? Every time I speak somewhere, I ask that question, how many of you like debt? I never get anybody to admit that they like debt. But yet, if you look at it, debt, it's an epidemic, it's a cancer in our country today. All the way down from our government, down to our kitchen tables. It's a cancer that's growing. Everybody wants to finance everything. Anybody know where the first credit card started and what its name was? Maybe even still is. Started in New York City, Diners Club card. Some rich fat cats, they wanted to go out to eat, but they didn't want to carry cash, didn't want to do this stuff. So what they do is they set up just a little group of themselves that they would be able to give that at different restaurants and so forth, that purchase their meals and so forth, then they pay it in a bill later. It's kind of like having a tab. Remember the old general store we used to watch on the Waltons? Some young people don't listen, the rest of you. The tab at the Waltons, remember that? That's what they would have, then they would pay that. And it grew into something that was huge. I know when I worked for IBM back in the late 90s, they issued us a Diners Club. I'm like, what in the world is this thing, right? IBM coming out of New York, I'm sure there were some ties in there as well. But a credit card, it's grown into today a multi-trillion dollar business. I used to work for GE Capital. One of their ideas was, let's make money off everybody else's money. Not a good thing if you're on the backside of that equation there. But look at that. I want you to understand something. Debt's not a good master. If you look at that verse there in Proverbs chapter 22 and verse 6, how many of you, without looking it on the screen, I know you're reading it there, and by the way, when I send her this stuff, I've got it staged to where it rolls in one after another because the way it has to convert and go in the system, it doesn't roll one line at a time as a result, so you're seeing the whole thing. But how many have ever heard that verse before? Proverbs 22 verse 6. Train up a child in the way he should go. When he is old, he will not depart from it. There's something that you invest and you place in that child's life to teach them. And we all know the spiritual connotations of that. Our children should be brought to church. When I was young, I had a drug problem. I was drugged to church on Sunday morning and Sunday night and Wednesday night, and every time we had a revival, and I actually went to a Christian school, and I was drugged 5 days a week on top of that to go to church. A drug problem. But the fact is, my parents did a very good job of making sure that they invested the Scripture, invested the Lord in me from the responsibility of being a parent to do that. I always called it the embarrassment verse. Because that's what I heard all the time as a young person. I know we don't have a lot of young people, teenagers and older adolescents. We don't have those in there. But when I was their age and I'm sitting in this stuff and I hear the pastor or Sunday school teacher or an evangelist or somebody talking about Proverbs chapter 22, verse 6, it finally dawned on me, this is an embarrassment verse. That's what my parents, because I don't want you to go out and do some things that you're going to embarrass me with. That's the way I looked at it. But the truth is, that's a very important verse. Now, before I share something with you, I want to read this to you. This is the first time that I've ever spoke anywhere, and I've actually read this document, okay? We started our very first class on May the 16th, if my dates are correct. And that morning, I have a pattern every morning when I get up, is on Sunday mornings, is to go through my Sunday school lesson. And since I've been teaching these lessons, to go through those on that particular day as well before I head off to church and to Sunday school and all the activities, and obviously make it here. That Sunday morning on May the 16th when I got up, there was something that came in. I don't remember whether it was Facebook or it was Twitter. I don't think it came in my email. But it's a copy of an opinion piece that is part of the Hill magazine. Anybody familiar with the Hill magazine? The Hill they're talking about is Congressional Hill or Capitol Hill, right, in Washington, D.C. It's a publication that pretty much centers around politics and typically the left-leaning side of politics, okay? But what I want you to read, I'm going to read, as you see those highlights there, I want to read you some different pieces in that, not to take a lot of time. But just going into this is an opinion from a lady named Amy Kuzlada, if I'm pronouncing that right, a research analyst for a labor union and a member of the Debt Collective, okay? She's writing specifically with the main thrust being student loans. Here's where it starts. Debt is often used as a tool of oppression. Across centuries and geographies, powerful elites have used debt not only as a means to extract profit, but also as a means to silence and coerce the working class. Goes on to say, when the Spanish crown outlawed the slavery of indigenous peoples in 1542, colonists circumvented that mandate by placing indigenous peoples under debt, listen to this, peonage. Remember that word, peonage? Peons? Yeah, peons. To ensure that they would remain in a state of servitude. Similar and widespread exploitation was used as a tool for all colonists to maintain power and to steal land from communities across the Americas. Examples abound on how this plays out today on a daily basis, even in our own lives. Interest rates can compound over time, burying people further into debt that becomes increasingly impossible ever to repay, much like the debt peonage of the indigenous peoples of the 16th century. Fast forward to the present day. Indigenous students who took out student loans for their education are also dealing with the impact of crippling student loan debt and the trauma and financial effects of intergenerational wealth theft, including indigenous land theft, and are again disproportionately affected by these issues. Consumer debt more broadly, now at a harrowing $14.6 trillion. Now she's combining a lot of things with mortgages and their car payments, a lot of stuff, because I've got some different numbers that we'll get into. Current interest rates sit at an average of 16.12%, with 1/3 of borrowers paying interest rates higher than 20%. Those paying interest rates of 20% or higher are often the most least paid and most marginalized among us. Usurious interest rates, which could be better regulated or abolished, compounded with poverty wages, form the perfect storm by keeping people overworked, exhausted, and imprisoned. And I would go on to add, these are my words now, stressed, anxious, and depressed, in a largely inescapable cycle of debt and repayment. A recent study by the American Psychological Association found that people dealing with debt are more likely to face health issues brought on by stress, anxiety, and depression. 1 in 15 borrowers with high principals has considered suicide. Those in power have something to gain by keeping us in debt. That something is our labor, our time, our well-being, and our freedom. When I read that morning, I'm like, oh my, I wish I was teaching on debt today. Because the truth is, she hit the nail on the head. I would guess, just knowing my beliefs and more than likely her beliefs from what she does, what she writes about there specifically about student loans, she and I probably wouldn't agree on eye to eye a lot of things. But we agree on that. Because that verse, train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. Does that make sense to you? You see any problem with that? Well, what about the next verse? Have you ever read the next verse? You know, Paul Harvey used to say, the rest of the story, right? That next verse, the rich ruleth over the poor, and the borrower is servant to the lender. Now, I don't like to change God's word, but a slave to the lender, which is exactly what she's talking about. Folks, there's a game going on today, and we have been willing participants to be a part of it. And it's known as debt. And who gets us into debt? We do. We do. And we'll talk about the reasons why here in just a minute. But the truth is, the rich ruleth over the poor, and the borrower is servant to the lender. I don't know whether you've ever been in debt. You may even be in debt today. But I would tell you, I agree with that wholeheartedly, because when I got out of debt, it was just like a freedom. I remember, I used to get paid, when I was working in the corporate world, I used to get paid on the 5th or the 6th and the 21st. And my wife, that was part of her job since I was working, she would pay the bills. My philosophy was, if I can get my wife to do the finances, if anything ever happened to me, she'd be able to carry on. I'd fight my way through it and be all right. But I wanted to make sure she and the rest of my family was going to be okay. So by the time I would get home from work, she's paid all the bills, she's done whatever, and whatever's left. And I remember coming home, I'm like, where's all her money? She's been paying debt. Well, then we got into paying off debt, paying off aggressively. And over about a 26-month period, we paid off everybody that we owed. A truck, a van, a camper, about $36,000 in credit card debt. Just staying focused and denying ourselves of everything else. Now, let me say we. I was pushing it. I'm fortunate to still be married, okay? Because I can't teach my clients to do that today, or they never would do it, right? But there was a lot of stress. But over about 26 months, we got out of debt and was thankful for it. But I remember coming home the first time we didn't have any debt. And I remember looking at the bank account, or actually looking, we keep it on Quicken, so I pulled that up that day or the next day or whatever, and I looked, and here's all this money in there. I'm like, Lisa, did you not pay the bills? She said, yeah, they're all paid. What? Everything's taken care of. Well, why do we have all this money in here? She said, we don't have any debt anymore. Wow, this is nice. Yeah, I'm no longer a servant to the lender. I'm on the backside now. Let me tell you something tonight. Debt is not a sin. I don't think you'll find anywhere in God's word where debt is a sin. But you will never find anywhere from Genesis to Revelation, and a lot of it's right there in the center around Proverbs, you won't find anywhere in there where it talks about the positive aspect of debt. There's not. Proverbs chapter 22, verse 7, we just read that. Does everybody want to be a slave to the lender? Nothing positive about that. Romans chapter 13, verse 8. Anybody know what that says? Owe no man nothing but to love one another, because when you love one another, then you're fulfilling the law. Well, guess what? When I can't fulfill the law, it's probably because I'm in a debt situation with somebody. I can't love them because guess what? I'm a slave to the lender. 2 Kings chapter 4, if you remember that story. I always get them confused, Elijah and Elisha, right? But the prophet's there, and this lady, her husband has died, and they had a tremendous amount of debt. I encourage you to read this, 2 Kings chapter 4. And she goes to the prophet, wringing her hands, what am I going to do? Because of the debt, they want to take my son's servant to the lender. The prophet told her to find all the vessels that she could and fill them with oil, and the oil just kept coming. And she was selling it. It just kept coming. In other words, go to work for it. Be able to do this. And the oil just kept coming. She kept selling it. Guess what? Paid herself out of debt. Kept her sons with her as opposed to giving to somebody who actually, in truth, the lending piece, actually owned them. God does not expect debt to be the norm for his children. I truly believe when we believe that we should be in debt and so forth, we're robbing God the opportunity to be a blessing to us. Because we're going to take care of it on our own. We'll talk more about that as we go on here. If we are in debt, and I know a lot of Christians who are, in fact, quite frankly, I probably know more who are than who are not when it comes, because the debt piece is not something that separates the Christian from the world. We're in it. We're in it big time up to our eyebrows. God does not expect a Christian to stay in debt long term. And I would even tell you, even with a mortgage. We all know about the mortgage piece. You know, typically 30 years on a mortgage is going to take us to be able to buy that house. My pastor said something very profound today from the pulpit. I won't get it right with what he said, but the truth is, he said, you people in here think you own your house. You don't own it. You're owned by somebody who you're making payments to. And he said the money's going back to just a small number of banks in the world that control all of that are being run by a small number of people that are taking the money from everybody else. I'm like, you're absolutely correct. You think you own it, stop making payments on it. See what happens. See how long that lasts. Well, it'll last for a little while now because I think they just extended the moratorium on foreclosures, right? So probably another month or so. Then they'll get back into that business. The truth is, we shouldn't be in debt long term. Also, God also says never to be a surety as a co-signer. You know what that means? And I'll tell you what, I've got some stories that would curl your hair. You go to the bank, they run their paper. Now, keep in mind, the bank that you go to, they are the professionals when it comes to loaning money. Would you agree? And they're doing everything about you to take a risk analysis to make sure that you are qualified on the terms of their risk analysis to be able to loan you money because you're going to be, quote unquote, a good bet to pay that back. But they do all their analysis and they say, what's your name? Gabriel. Gabriel, I'm not putting, yeah. Gabriel, I'm sorry, but we can't loan you that money. You're not qualified to be able to do that. So what does Gabriel do? He really wants that car. Or he really wants that house. Or what, typically not a house you're not going to co-sign for, but a car, maybe to get on a credit card, any number of things we're going into debt for. So Gabriel runs back to mom and dad, or Gabriel runs to aunt and uncle so-and-so, or Gabriel runs to grandma and grandpa, or maybe even his friend from school or a work associate or whatever. Hey, listen, the bank, they're not giving me this loan. I know I'm good for it. I'm making the money to be able to do that. And whoever you run to said, well, yeah, I'll go with you to co-sign for that. Absolutely. Do not, under any circumstances, ever do that, okay? How many would go to the doctor for a very serious illness and they would tell you what's wrong and you say, well, let me go ask cousin Bubba. If Bubba agrees with that and thinks that's, no, you're leaving it to the professionals and they're saying, you're a bad credit risk. But grandma, grandpa, mom and dad, your buddy, your brother or sister, oh no, I know him, I grew up with him. My kids raised him. I know. He cuts his hair just nice. He's got a nice, yeah, I'll co-sign for him. You know what happens? 9.5 times out of 10, the bank was right. Doesn't make you a bad guy, but based upon their risk analysis, you were one that they could not loan money to because you don't pay it back. And you know who gets left holding the bag? Whoever signed that surety. And there's scripture to back that up. The Bible says get away from that stuff, all right? Get away from that. Don't do that. Just encouragement here. I've had one of those stories. I had at the time, they were actually going to church with me. They wanted to come to my office and talk to me about some financial stuff, and they did, and they came in and literally wringing their hands. And he wasn't going to say anything, but she opened up and told me what had happened. I want to say it was a granddaughter. Might have been a niece or nephew. I think it was a granddaughter. Wanted to buy this vehicle, used vehicle, couldn't afford it. And they called, I know, I remember the story now. They lived here in Atlanta, and this niece, nephew, granddaughter, whoever it was in Knoxville, Tennessee, okay? And wanted them to sign for it. And the grandparents late at night said, or aunt and uncle, whoever it was, said, sure, we'll sign for it. That salesman, that finance person, whoever, drove from Knoxville, Tennessee, it's a 4-hour drive, from there to Cumming, Georgia, knocked on their door in the middle of the night for them to sign that paper. said, well, what's the problem? Oh, we don't know where she's at. We don't know where the vehicle's at. We don't know if she's still got it. Last we heard, she was out west. We don't know. All we know is they're after us to make the payments on it now, because she hadn't made a payment in months. And she's nowhere to be found to repossess the thing. We're on the hook for that. And taking the story on, had they repossessed it, they're not in the business to buy and sell cars. They're going to sell that car for whatever they can get out of it, and whatever the difference is, they're going to go back to her. If she doesn't pay it, then they're going back to the co-signer to get that. Do you see the mess? Debt's a crazy thing. Do not be a surety for anybody. Why do we get in debt? Now, clearly, I've got those answers there that instead of coming up one by one, they came up. But in your mind, why do we get in debt?
A lot of it's 'cause people want something now and don't have the money for it.
Yeah, absolutely, in a hurry. We live in a pressure cooker world, a microwave world, as opposed to a crock pot world. Would you agree? So much, yeah. Why? And honestly, if you ask most people, statistically, why did you get into debt? They will tell you what really started more often than not was the credit card they got to protect them from emergencies. And typically they get that, I shouldn't say typically, a lot of times they get that as being a college student. One of the benefits of the house, or one of the benefits of the housing and actually the economic collapse of about 15 years ago was the fact that Congress instituted some rules to where they can no longer give those credit cards away on college campuses. I remember we weren't in college, but we were married, and my wife was working a second job. If I could have got her to work a third job, I'd have bought me a new truck, but I couldn't talk her into that. She was just working a second job, and seriously, she was doing this right around the holidays. It was a seasonal thing. She was working at LS Ayres, Kenwood Mall in Cincinnati. And I remember this night she came home with this 2-liter Pepsi. I'm like, wow, where'd you get that? We were broke. Young people, we were broke. I said, where'd you get that at? She said, well, they were signing up people for credit cards for the LS Ayres store, and they were giving you a free Pepsi to sign up. I said, okay, cool. We probably spent the next 20 years of our married life paying for that 2-liter Pepsi. Because of debt that we incurred, because that one didn't satisfy. Kind of like that gal there. Let's just throw the card at it. And the point is we get that one to take care of those emergencies. And while we had intended, I'm going to use this only for this and I'm going to pay it off next month, life happened. And we couldn't pay it off. And when life happened, we couldn't afford that either, so we put that on there. Before you know it, we maxed that one out. We better get another one. And it grows, and it grows, and it grows. First thing I want you to see, there's no clear vision of the future. We don't have a clue what's going to happen. None. I'll tell you the truth, you guys know we're moving. Lord willing, this week we're moving out of our house. And to be further honest with you, my wife found a house. And I'm laughing about it because she found a house. We actually did a drive-by Friday night before. I texted my real estate agent. She said, let's go look at this, then we'll text the real estate agent and see if we can look at it Saturday. While she was making some stuff with my granddaughter, I texted him. I said, go ahead and set this up for tomorrow because I know she didn't want to see it. And we drove by it that night. She didn't say too much other than to say, that house checks off every bucket on our list, or every check mark on our bucket list on a house. And I'm like, okay, I guess it does. So we went and looked at it yesterday. Truth is, it's a very nice house. And the number one thing that I wanted on our list of things is no mortgage. I haven't had a mortgage payment. And I'm just 3 months shy of 14 full years of no mortgage payment. No mortgage payment. I don't want this. I don't know whether you've kept up with housing prices and so forth, but they're through the roof. So I'm trusting the Lord to get us into a house. This house would mean no mortgage payment. It's a nice house. It does take care of just about everything. It's missing a basement that I would prefer, don't have to have, and a little bit bigger yard. Okay, those two things. I don't live without both of them. But my wife really wants this house, and we bid on that last night. So if you would, pray with us. Not that the Lord would give us that house, because I don't know what's wrong with the house. Pray with us that the Lord's will would be done, that He'd open the right doors, and we would be accepted, or we would be rejected, and that she doesn't cry all night tomorrow night if we are, okay, in doing that. But sir, here's what I'm saying about that. We were walking around with the real estate agent at that house yesterday morning, and she said, I'm telling you right now, Tim, she said, when I drove by it last night, I just wanted to put an offer in last night. And I'm in another room and I heard him, well, you can't do that, Lisa. You got to look at the house. I don't care. I like this house. I want to be able to do it. You think about a clear vision. She had no clue what was going on behind the wall of that door. None. But yet she saw what looked good to her. No clear vision of what the future held. No clear vision of what was going to happen. No clear vision of what may be better down the road. But what we do, we get into debt. We get into debt. Number two, we're not trusting that we can be taken care of. Did you know my God owns the cattle on 1,000 hills? But yet I can't trust him to give me a truck. I can't trust him to give me a house. I can't trust him to clothe me. I can't. Now, how crazy is that? We also live in the United States of America, right? Do you know anybody in this country who's going naked? I'm not talking about people who intentionally do it, because we got some of those, right? You can probably find some of them tonight. I'm talking about the need that they have. Now, I'm not saying they're wearing designer suits, fancy clothes, I'm not saying that, but we don't have a clothing problem in the United States of America. And I got clients I got one lady that quit. She fired me because I was getting on her because she was spending $250 a month on clothes. All I did was challenge her spending. $250, man, have you ever add that up? That's $500 every 2 months. It's $3,000 a year on clothes. How much can you wear a day? We don't trust that we're going to be taken care of. We take the ability of God to manage and monitor and take care of everything that we need. We take that out of the way because you know what? I got a MasterCard. Number three, a presumption on the future. We always presume that we're going to have the money to make the payments. We always presume that we're going to have the job to be able to earn the money to make the payments. We're always going to presume that we're going to be healthy enough to maintain the debt that we think we can handle. The truth is we can. Back in 1998, many of you know Jason Holt, our missionary to Santiago, Chile. I almost said I know Jason here, but he never was that short. He was always tall. I'd known him since he was a teenager. His dad was our pastor when we first moved to Atlanta 25 years ago. But I remember in 1998, we were in negotiations to buy a Ford Windstar van over here in Beaufort at the Ford dealer. I think it was Wade Ford at the time. I forget what it is now, but same place, Ford, but it's just a different name, Wade Ford. And I remember sitting in that church that morning praying, God, would you help us not to make a decision here of something that we can't afford to pay? I believe me, I was living in debt. A lot of it at that particular, that's that van we paid off in 2003. But in 1998, I'm praying, God, please don't help me presume that everything is okay. But I went on with this. Lord, please don't help me or help us make a decision because of our decision and the payment that we may get in would keep us from being obedient, biblically obedient in our giving, both in our tithes, offerings, and missions. And he was faithful to do that. He was faithful to do that. But a lot of times we'll just run out. You know, we'll run out and do what we want to do. When you go to a car dealership, anybody ever been there? Yeah, we've all been there. I worked with a guy in Cincinnati who used to work, we worked at General Electric data centers, so we worked computers. But one of his jobs when he first got married and got out of school was as a car salesman. And he said, we would sit at our desk, and he said, especially if we had somebody that just didn't have any idea what was going on. He said, the thing is, we would put their lights out. That was talking about the great deal that we got. And he said the code for everybody, or that we got, that they're paying for. And he said what we would do, sit behind that desk when they're filling out the paperwork and stuff, and our signal to everybody else there was to call the seeing eye dog. We'd be doing that. Everybody, all the salesmen knew, oh, they just put this fellow's lights out. They just got him paying more, and especially in interest, than what he should have paid, and we're going to reap the benefit of this. It was a game to them, a game to them. When I went to school at the University of Cincinnati, my economics teacher, I don't remember his name, it just started with a Z. He wasn't married, still lived with his mom. He's in his probably 50s at the time. But what he did for entertainment, he said on Sundays, you know those big business checks? You know, the big ones, not your regular personal checks, but the big ones. He said, I'd take one of those, I'd put it in my pocket. He said, I'd go to car lots. He said, you watch those salesmen just follow you around like little puppy dogs because you had that big check in your pocket. That's what he did for entertainment. I said all that to say this. When you go to a car lot today, you're met at the door, probably in a parking lot when you get out of your vehicle by a salesman. The first question that they're going to ask you is, how much can you afford to pay? Because they'll put you in a $100,000 Hummer for the next 30 years of your life for $275 a year, if that's all you've got to be able to pay. They'll work it out to be, I'm being a little dramatic there, but the fact is they will put you into something that you can't afford because they don't care. They're just making money. They're making a commission on this. And if they can get you to finance it, the more money they're actually going to make on that as well.
I call them vultures.
They are. They're vultures. You're exactly right. You're exactly right. Now, a rich person will go in there, and before they have an opportunity to get to that rich person will hit them up and say, how much is this going to cost me? They look at things totally different because debt's costing them. A presumption for the future. Somebody said this. You said it a different way. A want versus a need. Give me a want.
Car, brand new.
Give me a need.
There you go.
Yeah. You can even go with the car thing. Because I think I shared with you one of my first things. Do you know how good I would look driving a Lexus LS 500? I tell my wife this all the time. Has he got one?
Our coworker just bought one.
He what?
He just bought one.
You did?
No, our coworker.
I was taking my example back about the credit worthiness there. I'm like, all right. I had a lady in my office several years ago who had just went bankrupt. She came in and she had a Lexus LS 400. I said, oh, I love those cars. She said, don't ever sit in one. Don't ever sit in one. She said, they'll hook you. But I joke all the time and say, tell my wife, I said, do you know how good you would look riding, not driving, that Lexus LS 500? The truth is that's a one. And as much as I joke about it, no, I wouldn't, but I'd rather have a pickup truck, to be honest with you. That's a one. But what do I need? Transportation, right? There's a difference there. But we go into debt because of the want that we had. Several years ago, I was sitting in Alpharetta, and they got those turn lanes, traffic going by, but they had these two left-hand turn lanes. And I'm sitting in the right one getting ready to turn left, and there's another guy in this souped-up BMW in the left-hand lane. And I mean, it's a good-looking car. It was shining, oh, it was looking good. And he pulled up beside me, the music's blaring and all this stuff, and I'm just looking out of my pickup truck at him, and he's got his hand on the steering wheel, and he kind of glances at me, and I kind of cover my mouth. I think, he thinks I'm thinking he's cool. The truth is, I'm thinking, man, I wouldn't want that car payment. And that's exactly what I was thinking. I wouldn't want that car payment. See, most of the time we get into debt, buying things that we don't need to impress people that we don't know, and if we did know, we wouldn't like them anyways. A credit score. How many of you believe that you have to increase your credit to get a good credit score? Anybody believe that? Truth is, you do. Your credit score is no more than a picture of what you do with debt. All right, I still think I said increase your credit, increase your debt to be able to. Your credit score is no more than a picture of what you do with debt. So I hope nobody in here is playing the lottery. All right, but play with me in this game. Any idea what your credit score is? Make up a number. Don't tell me a truthful.
Say
800. Pretty good, because I think it's 840 or 850 is the max. Pretty good, right? Now, no disrespect, that's what shows me doing a lot with credit, okay, because I know you made up a number, all right? The lower that number is, you still have a lot, but we haven't been doing what we should be doing, not paying it and all that good stuff. We'll look at some of these numbers here in just a minute. But let's assume for a minute, $800 or 800 credit score, and tonight you stopped. He didn't even know it. You went in to get you a cup of coffee at the Quick Trip, and you bought that lottery ticket. Shame on you. You won $35 million. They write you a big old check for $35 million in your name and hand it to you. What's your credit score then? Still 800. Has nothing to do with our net worth. Has nothing to do for the money, what we own or possess. All it has to do with is what we've been doing with credit. But everybody wants to improve that credit score to position them to buy houses more often than not. Typically, people are not concerned about their credit score other than the ability to be able to get a car. They're not worried about the interest rate. What they're really looking for is that credit score because I want to buy a house at some point, okay? Now, if you have been gainfully employed continuously for the last 2 years, your debt-to-income ratio is within acceptable terms, and you've been paying your bills on time or even early, you qualify for the best mortgage rates out there. Some of you older folks will remember what I'm about to say. You have to go through the manual underwriting route. You ever been through manual underwriting when you got a mortgage? No? You probably have, maybe not, they didn't call it that at that particular point. Back,
It has to do with pre-qualification.
well, pre-qualification is what they're doing currently to be able to do that, but they're taking that from your social security number off of your FICO score to be able to do that. With manual underwriting, what you do is you brought in all this box of stuff, your bank account records, your statements, your bills where you've been paying, all this stuff, your pay stubs. I remember when we got our first mortgage in 1987, went to the credit union to apply for the mortgage, and I had a shoebox full of paperwork. There was no credit score back then. Today, you call, you give them your social security number, oh, your credit score is 540, you call me when it gets up about 650. Or let me see what kind of tweaks we can do to get you to 650. You got an 800, what would you like to buy? All right? The better your score, the better off you're gonna be. The truth is that credit score, which a lot of people are trying to achieve, is based upon this. 35% of your payment history, 30% of your level of debt, remember that debt to income ratio, 15% on the length of debt, how long you been maintaining this, not really paying it down, 10% if you've got newer credit to be able in there, and 10% on the type, right? A mortgage versus a car payment versus credit cards versus on down the line, what types of debt. And you may be putting stuff in and all your numbers are exactly the same as hers, but she'll have a higher credit score than you. Go figure, all right? It's just different. That's what it is. There's no real rhyme or reason to it. Another thing your credit score will do, the higher your credit score, will help you save money on things like car insurance.
Jobs.
No, wait a minute. I've got to be in debt to get a better rate on my car insurance. So I've got a pile of cash and no debt. I'm going to pay more in car insurance. Are you not being punished? We were on our way to my mom's, right after my dad passed away 2.5 years ago, Christmas. Opening accounts, long story, the lady called, we were going through Berea, Kentucky on I-75. Lady called from the credit union. She said, Mr. Thompson, I'm just trying to wrap up these accounts that you're trying to open here. We want to get them done by the first of the year. She said, do you realize your wife's credit score is 0? I said, really? 0? And she said, yes, sir. I said, that's cool. She said, cool? I said, oh, I'm sorry, it was good. That's good. She said, good. And I said, yeah, and then it clicked. Wait a minute. I said, no, wait a minute. You know what I do for a living. You know I'm a financial coach, and I teach people to get out of debt, stay out of debt, not play with those things. I said, so let me ask you a question. I said, which would be better off, have a pile of cash or a high credit score? And her response to me was this, and I will forget it. Oh. I interpreted O to mean, we're not going to make any money off this guy with interest. All right? Let's just go on. Or O, maybe I didn't look at it that way. Maybe I would be better off if I had a pile of cash as opposed to debt. Credit score. Don't worry about the credit score, all right? Don't worry about your credit score. However, I want you to see that it is time for a change. And I would encourage everybody, if you're carrying any debt, let's get going on this stuff. Let's get this thing taken away and be done with it. Because some reality stuff that I want you to see here. Do you realize we owe more on student loans than on credit cards? That Amy lady, she's focusing on student loans. You know why? Because we owe more on student loans than we do on credit cards. Whoop, that went too far there, didn't I? Went way too far. There you go. Looking at that, $1.71 trillion on student loans as of early this year, with roughly 45 million people, account holders on student loans. How old are you? I just saw the look on your face. 19. 19? Where do you go to school at? University of Georgia? You don't have student loans, do you?
I have.
No, you don't have to answer it. I'm just teasing. I just saw, when you saw that, you went. Yeah, I saw that. My former pastor, Jason Holt's dad, he taught me something when we moved to Georgia, that a hit dog always yelps. Have you all ever heard that from the South? I'm from the North, and I'm like, what in the world is he? He said it about 10 times. I said, brother, you got to tell me what that means. He said, when I'm preaching, and I say something to step on somebody's toes, I can see in their facial expression and their body language. I hit something right there. A hit dog always yelps, right? I've always remembered that. When I saw your face, I'm like, ooh, she's college age and she saw what's going on, because you know what? It's robbing people of their future. To the point that Amy's now writing about, let's wipe it out. You know what would happen to our economic system if we just wiped out $1.7 trillion of debt? I don't even want to think about it. On the other hand, you look at $819 billion in credit card debt. Now that's coming from student loan, or student, what is that? Student? What? Yeah, Loan Hero, can't see it from here, and creditcards.com, those two different numbers there. She had some different numbers that she was looking at. Over here, according to Linden Tree, 196, let's call it 200 million card holders. You notice I didn't say people. Average balance, 5,200 per card. Household, 9,000, rounding it off, $9,000. Average interest rate of 15%. You want a hot investment tip? To the tune of about 15%. Pay off your credit cards. Just like you're bringing in 15% when you're not paying it out. Looking at that. Now, point out that 196.8 million people. Anybody know what the population of the United States is?
336.
What is it?
336.
Somewhere right in that neighborhood. I was going to say 325, 330. Yeah. Million. Man, woman, boy, girl. And 200 million cards in circulation. That number on other sites I have seen when I've done research is much higher. I went with that one because it looked more, hopefully, realistic. Debt consolidation, not the answer. Anybody ever been through debt consolidation? Do not raise your hand. You notice I've got that word con. Remember we were in school, sound that stuff out? It's a game, all right? Because what happens when you go into that, yeah, it combines those debts that you have. Yes, it brings in a lower interest rate, and yes, you have a lower monthly payment. But the truth is you don't change your behavior. I'm gonna be careful, almost every potential client or client who's sat in my office and asked me if that's a good thing to do, my response to them is, have you ever consolidated in the past? I cannot think of anybody right now who told me, no, I've never done that. I just think it would be a good idea. They have, and it's gotten worse, and it's gotten worse, and it's gotten worse because their behavior never changed. We got to get out of this debt situation. And how do you get out of that? You got to do things differently. Remember, it's time for a change. We've got to do. We don't want to be part of the statistics anymore. First thing we've got to do is stop borrowing. Stop borrowing. You ever known somebody who's been told they have lung cancer and they still smoking cigarettes? What's up with that? Same thing. I'm in debt up to my eyeballs. Let me get another credit card. Or worse, let me play a little shell game. That's what I did. What I was doing, I was getting transfer letters. This is before we got into the mode of paying off debt. I was paying off debt because what I do is I get a transfer letter. Hey, Discover would send me a thing. You can open an account for us. You can transfer your balance here for 0% interest for a certain period of time. I do it. Ooh, I paid that one off. No, I just cleaned that one up till I put more on it. I was playing a shell game. Did it for 19 years to be able to do that. Budget. How many remember what we learned 2 lessons ago? Budgeting. That will help you get out of debt. It will begin to expose and help you be intentional to what you should be doing, addressing those things what you need to be doing, showing you things that you could be doing differently so that you can throw more money at your debt and make it go away. Have an emergency fund. I just explained to you. A lot of people get into debt because they start to get an emergency fund based off a piece of plastic, and it grows. Everything becomes an emergency to be able to do that. Accrue, save for those needs. You already explained some things, what we've been doing differently to save for. Extra money. Now my wife was working that second job at the time to do that. Sure, we could use the money, but we probably weren't. I mean, that's been 37 years ago, 36 years ago. I don't remember what we were doing other than that 2-liter Pepsi. I don't know what we were doing with it, but the truth is, if you've got extra money working a job, you want to make sure that that extra money is going specifically to paying off that debt. Don't increase your lifestyle. I've got a client that lives right in this general area. Right? I won't say exactly where, but in the county right around here. And he was working at a company over on, what is that road going to Athens? No, the other one. 316. Did they call it something? Is it Athens Highway or whatever? Whatever, 316. He was working on, University, that's it. He was working on 316, but they decided they were going to get out of debt, so he was going to take on a different job, an extra job. What he did, this was when Uber was new, and he would drive to Athens and pick up college students and drive them around to the bars and things in Athens. And as he put it, we'd work with kids. He said, I would take money from kids using their parents' credit cards to drive them to different bars to be able to do that. He'd do that about 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. Then he'd go home, crawl in bed with his wife who's been there by herself all night since he got off work, nobody there. He get in bed, sleep for about 4 or 5 hours, do the very same thing the next day. And finally it caught up with him to realize, I'm neglecting my wife. We're not seeing each other. And so what they started doing was that extra money he was making, restaurants, travel, clothes, gifts, and they were in a situation worse than what they intended to be. You've got to stay focused, take extra money, pay it off, and then work the debt snowball. Anybody ever worked the debt snowball? I'm going to show you here in just a minute. Hypothetical situation. Nobody in here, in fact, some of these numbers are crazy low, to be honest with you, all right? That 20,000 student loan, I've got clients that put another 0 and increase that 2, 3, 4 times as well with student loan debt that they have. Yeah, you're right. I told you you could curl your hair with some things, all right? So there's a lot of things to be thankful for. But if you look at that, JCPenney, we've owed them. What did we buy at JCPenney? We still owe them $350. What was it we bought? I don't have a clue what we bought from them. Best Buy, you know, was that my last laptop, or were those speakers that we bought? Maybe it was a car installation, stereo installation. Fresh Start, what in the world's Fresh Start? We don't know what Fresh Start is, all right? A medical bill, a family loan, a car, all those things that we go into debt for, and there's how much we owe this particular time. And there is our monthly minimum payment. You add those up, I'm going off the top of my head, I want to say there's $33,000 in loan. Again, this is a good picture, right? It's just an illustrative thing. $33,000, did I say million? $33,000 in total debt. Our minimum payments are roughly about $1,100 a month, okay? And again, whether we're a lot of clients, that's a pretty good situation to do that. And so that monthly payment that we're paying there is $35 to JCPenney. But we did something novel. We had a garage sale. We put a bunch of stuff that we didn't even know we had out on the street, put a $2 sign in the yard that said garage sale, and invited people to come buy our junk. I mean our stuff. You know, one man's junk's another man's treasure. And they come buy that stuff, and we made $300. We're getting excited. We're doing this debt snowball thing. So we agreed, husband and wife, we're taking that $300 and we're going to pay JCPenney off. Done. We're paying them in a monthly minimum of $35. We paid them that. We got $300. They're paid off this month. Don't remember what we put on JCPenney, but it's paid off. Let's get rid of that card. And I would encourage you to cut up that card, call or write JCPenney and say, cancel the account, okay? But now we've got an extra $35 in our budget, and specifically in our debt snowball, because we want to keep it in our debt snowball. That doesn't go to out to eat, doesn't go to clothes, it doesn't go to any of those other things. It goes specifically to the debt snowball. And that $35 that we have can be added to the $75 that we're paying Best Buy, and that new payment to Best Buy is $110. And we can pay Best Buy off faster. Now we're still making those minimum payments on down there, the 150, the 100, all the way down. We're making those minimum payments as we go down through there. But that Best Buy is in the crosshairs, and we're throwing $110 a month at him. And we're going to pay him off in no time while we're still paying the other ones down slightly, right? Because we still have interest accruing. But that 110, when we get him paid off, can be added now to the 150, and we can hit that one at $260 a month. Do you see how this is growing? Your payment, when we're focusing on one, that payment gets bigger and bigger and bigger each month, and it takes down more debt month after month after month. We keep going down through there. That 260 is added to the 100, 360 a month. And this is taking some time to be able to do it. In fact, if my calculations are right, if we just paid the minimum payments, we didn't add any more to it, and I'm not calculating interest in it, just simply saying simple math, it would take us about 9 years to pay off that by making minimum payments. Don't know how long it would take you to pay off your credit card. It's supposed to be in bold print on there now. One of the other changes from back in 2008, 9, and that financial mess we had. Going on down there, the 360 gets added to the 100. That family loan gets starting paid at $460 a month. You're starting to feel this thing now. This is working for you. You're watching stuff get paid off. Just a little bit more to go. Smaller number of debts, bigger amount that we owe, but we're throwing more at it on a monthly basis. We pay off the family loan. Now that $460 that we've been paying, which is a culmination of everything above it, that snowball, now picks up to $400, and we're paying them $860 a month on the balance that's remaining there. And before you know it, that's paid off, and the $860 gets added to the student loan, and we're paying them $1,110 a month. Do you see how that works? So long as we stay focused and intentional and disciplined to that. On average, most people that I work with, on average, some have more, some have less, but on average, about 6 unsecured debts. credit cards, car loans, and the like. And I have found over my last 15 years of doing this, if I can get them to pay off 3, they never look back. It's just like, ooh, watching those zeros begin to add up. The momentum is there to be able to keep this thing moving forward. Look at this, $33,600 total, $1,110 a month, minimum payments. What if we did it? Minimum payments, 9.5 years. But using that debt snowball in that example, the garage sale and $300, what I just walked through there with you is probably about 3.5 years. Knock off 2/3 of the life of that just by focusing on one debt at a time, using that debt snowball to allow that one that you're paying off to be added to the next one and increase that payment there. But what if we could add an additional $500? Anybody have an idea what the average car payment in America is today? It's about $554. Average car payment. Average length of loan, about 72 months now. Crazy. That was the end of 2020. What if we added another $500 a month to that? You could pay all that off in 2 years. By denying yourself the things that we want. Still living on the needs. See, people ask, well, how did you pay off all that debt in that short period of time? Like that. We just denied everything else. 2 or 3, probably been about 3 years ago, right after Brian Kemp was inaugurated governor, I was invited down to a lunch thing of Faith and Freedom, and went down there, and I had come back to a client. It poured down rain. We're coming out of there, the lieutenant governor was coming in just as I was leaving. He was drenched. I was helping dry him off because he had to speak to go up. He's from Cumming as well, so we were talking. And I ran out to my car, and I'm going up 400, and I'm literally soaking. And I called my wife and said, any way you can leave work, get me some clothes and take it to the office to me, but I got to meet with this client. So I get to the office, and I run in, I call her, I said, forget it, I'll be fine with this. I'm not too wet now. It was in April, and I got the heat going on, that truck just to kind of dry me out. But I got out, and it was raining again and coming, and I ran across the parking lot. I'm like, what is wrong with my foot? What's wrong with my foot? And I got in my office, and I sat down in my chair, and I pulled it up, and I had a big old hole in the bottom of my shoe. It brought back some memories. We were getting out of debt. In that window of time, I had a couple pair of shoes that had holes in them. Getting them fixed, replaced them. Farthest thing on my mind. I want to get out of debt because we were paying that stuff and paying that stuff. I could begin to see that light at the end of that tunnel getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And it wasn't a train coming. We were making progress here. Now, I don't want to slow it down by getting a new pair of shoes or going out and paying probably as much getting these things resold. I'll just live with it. We'll be okay. Now, not everybody's going to do that, and I'm not telling you you need to do that. I'm saying that's what we did, and that's how we got intentional about this stuff to make it go away. It's time for a change. It's time for a change for you all if this applies to you, and if it doesn't necessarily apply to you with the debt, don't allow yourselves to get in a situation to where it does apply to you. Avoid it. Learn to say, let's practice it. Learn to say it. No. If you'll put your tongue on the roof of your mouth, right? No. Some of you ladies know how to do it real well, right? Because you tell your husband all the time, right? No. Practice. We've lost that word. We have lost that word. Parents don't want to tell their kids no. My poor granddaughter thinks her middle name's no. Chandler, no. Chandler, no. Chandler. We got to learn. Say no. Say no. It's time for a change. Chris Hogan used to work for the Dave Ramsey organization. Excellent quote. Interest we pay, credit cards, paying for debt, whatever, is a penalty. Interest we earn, savings, investments, and the like, is a reward. Now, where do you fit on either side of those two statements there? Interest we pay is a penalty. Interest we earn is a reward. Tonight, I hope I haven't been depressing. I hope that I've been encouraging to say, you know what? Debt is an epidemic. Avoid it. This time last year, everybody was trying to avoid COVID. I think this time last year we were calling it coronavirus, weren't we? Yeah. And then it morphed into COVID-19. But we were trying to avoid that. Everybody was staying put in their house because it was an epidemic that they didn't want, they wanted to control. It was a pandemic, all right, that they didn't want to continue to be exposed. So is the debt thing. But what are we doing? Being willing participants in that. And here's the truth. What it robs you from is your ability to do what God wants you to do. Remember, He owns it all, and He expects us to be a good steward. I'm going to say this and I'm going to close. The very first workshop that I ever did, back in 2004, 2005, maybe, I don't remember when. Sharon Baptist Church, some of you know of it, there in Swanee, Georgia. Randy Rye was the former pastor. Some people know that name. Chris Grinstead was the pastor then. He's still the pastor. And I remember having this workshop here, and I did it because it was going to be my first one. I had some guinea pigs to be a part of this. Free. It's going to be 3 consecutive Thursday nights. And we had some L-shaped desks. And this kid back in the, actually 3 young men back in the corner, I'm really, with everything I'm saying, I'm beating up on them as hard as I can, and pretty much everything. One of them was dating my daughter, okay? So that's exactly why I was beating up on them. But the second night, a guy, he wasn't at the first one. The second night he showed up, the second Thursday night, and got to know him a little bit, his name and all that good stuff. And the week later, he came back again for the last session. And I can tell when I'm talking, I'm really honing in on these guys back here. It's where they said all 3 nights, and I'm not sure they're having fun and all this stuff, but I want, as a father, you're dating my daughter, I want you to understand this stuff, okay? So I'm kind of beating up on him, but I can see out of my peripheral vision, this guy over here like he had ants in his pants. And finally I turned around and said, everybody okay? Everything's good? And I finally got around to him, everything okay? He's like, man. He said, do you mind if I say something? I said, no, absolutely not. He stood up, he said, you know, I was here last week and I thoroughly enjoyed it. And he said, I don't know what you're going to get into tonight, but I'm hoping it's just as good. He said, I missed that first week because my wife is pregnant, getting ready to have, I believe, our 3rd child, if I'm not, maybe a 2nd child. I think it was 2nd child now that I think about it. So she couldn't be with us. She can't be here now. She's getting ready to have a baby any day. But he said, what you're telling these people is true. He said, I'm 32 years old. I'll soon be 33 years old. He said, when I graduated from college, my parents on the day of my graduation gave me my graduation present, and it was a manila folder. He said, they handed it to me. He said, what's this? And they said, well, while you were working, going through high school and college and all this stuff, we took what you could have contributed to a Roth IRA, and we contributed that on your behalf. You have to earn that income to be able to do it. Whatever he was earning, they were putting in that amount that allowed him to do it into a Roth IRA, and we invested that for you, and it's growing. And there's a statement, there's what it's worth. And the only thing that we ask is that you continue to do that. And wherever you wind up working, that you maximize your 401k and contribute all that you can. He said, I'm 32, getting ready to turn 33, and we have 3 house payments left. I'm the dude giving the class. I'm like, man, I'm a long way from paying off my house. And I'm a long way past 32, 33. And it was his motivation to help me say, you know what? I need to be doing things differently. I'm a coach. I was out of debt at the time. Thank the good Lord I was out of debt, but we still weren't doing things like we should and started turning things around. I say all that to say this. Several months later, I called him. I said, hey man, how's it going? He said, oh, it's going great. I said, did you pay the house off? He said, oh, he said, it was great. He said, my wife and I, we got up early that morning and we drove down to the bank. And he said, my wife was so nervous about going in there and paying off the mortgage. And he's like, what are you so nervous about? And she said, what are we going to do without a mortgage? We've grown so accustomed to having a mortgage. What are we going to do without a mortgage? And he said, anything God wants us to do. That stuck with me all these years. Some what, 13, 14, 15 years now. Anything God wants us to do. The truth is today, with the situations that we get ourselves in, can we do anything financially, anything that God wants us to do? Maybe we can in this group, and I hope so, but that's not the case everywhere. So my point is, if it is, let's get out of debt. I've showed you how that debt snowball works tonight. I want you to make sure you give me those numbers. I want you to build your own debt snowball because you're going to have to work. Remember that budget we learned 2 lessons ago? That's where you got to start putting it into your budget. That one that is your smallest on your debt snowball is going to increase by that amount that you've got till you pay that puppy off. That amount that you've been paying rolls right down to the next one on the list, and pay it off as quick as you can. Before you know it, you'll be debt free. And say, wow, that stuff really works. Any questions, comments, concerns with what I said? Nothing. All right. Well, I appreciate y'all being here tonight. Appreciate you listening. We will not be here next Sunday night. Lord willing, I'll be recovering from a move, and we'll all be celebrating. You're pretty good. How many years as married? 345? I'm trying to do that in my head. 245. 245.
Yeah, it's
the
not
200.
300.
Yeah, the 245th birthday of the United States of America. And as we're celebrating, let me encourage you to pray for our country. Was it 2 Chronicles chapter 7, verse 14? Pray for our country. Our country's in bad shape. Would you dismiss us in a word of prayer?
Heavenly Father, we thank you again, Lord, for allowing us to be here tonight. Lord, thank you for each one that's gathered for this time of learning and instruction. Pray, dear God, that you would Lord, work in the life of your people. Lord, help us to become more financially disciplined. God, help us that we might look at money as a tool that you've given us to use. And I pray that you would help us to all be faithful in what you have provided for us, Lord. I ask that you would, Lord, bless now as we leave. I pray you watch over us, keep us safe until we meet back again. We give you thanks for who you are and what you're going to do in the lives of your people, Lord. In Jesus' name I ask. Amen.
Amen. Your numbers, if you give those to me, and for those of you who need to do it at home, need my email address, I can get that for you. Okay? Thank you all again.